Okay. So again, my name is Kendall Kosai. I am the Associate Regional Director for the ADL Pacific Northwest region. We are a national civil rights organization dedicated toward stopping hate and anti-Semitism across the country. We have 24 regional offices, and one of our offices is located here in Seattle that covers the entire Pacific Northwest, which includes Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska. So a very small geographic region. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the rise of online hate and what that means and how it has come to kind of fruition in the last several years, months, days, it feels like, and how you can combat it in a meaningful way. And so before I begin, a couple housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. I do encourage you to engage in the Q&A in the Whova app or the chat. Just if you have any questions or if you'd like to provide a comment. And in addition to that, we're going to try to keep it interesting today by showing a couple of different videos and just trying to keep you engaged throughout the process. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. A little bit about the ADL Pacific Northwest, as well as ADL. Our timeless mission is dual. It's to stop the defamation of the Jewish people, but it's also to secure justice and fair treatment for all. Like I mentioned before, we have a number of different regional offices across the country. Here we are in the upper left-hand corner of the country, covering 5 states, and we're really glad to be able to be here to provide some of our expertise. So what do we do as an organization? We advocate, we educate, and we engage. We advocate for holistic policies that address hate in our communities, from hate crimes legislation to ensuring that diverse and underrepresented communities are heard in their issues. We educate, so we go into K through 12 schools and provide anti-bias programming. Many of you in Oregon may know about our No Place for Hate program that I believe is actually happening right now in terms of another session during the summit. And then we engage. We engage the community in a meaningful way to talk about how to fight hate and really attempt to bring everyone into this conversation, because it does take a larger community effort in addressing hate. And so all these 3 buckets kind of filter into this larger theme of fighting hate for good. So that's who we are. So because I'm extremely structured, here's today's agenda. So we're gonna talk about the landscape of hate online today. We're gonna talk about where does online hate come from? How does it grow and propagate? And then lastly, what can we do about it? And I think the last part is probably the most important part of today, because I want folks to walk away with some knowledge after this session. So the landscape. And I thought I would show a video to kind of talk a little bit about what online hate is really like, and kind of the real world consequences that it has. So I'm going to show this video and we'll go from there. So let me see if I can, there it goes.
It's not like that movie.
Excuse me. Just gotta say one thing. I think gay people are sick, and you guys should just kill yourselves. Just end your miserable existence.
She's so stupid. You're so stupid. You know that though, right? You know you're stupid.
You are the weirdest f***ing kid in school.
Why do you always mess with me?
You know what? All of you Muslims, you need to go back to the hellholes you're from.
Can you believe this? F***ing terrorist.
What did you say?
You heard what I said. Fat bitches like you should get over themselves. Go on a diet.
I'm just waiting for mom. Can you please leave me alone?
I'm traumatized to get a gym membership.
I hate fat people. I think you should go. I think you should go.
She upset me too.
I think you should go.
Everyone hates you. You should hate yourself too.
What are you doing? Why are you talking to her like that?
Because she deserves it.
No, she doesn't. Like, walk away right now.
Homosexuality is a disease. You're saving humanity by killing yourself.
Get out of here right now.
Yeah.
Take a walk.
Here, sweetheart.
There we go.
This woman is dangerous. All Muslims are terrorists.
Yeah. I'm also a terrorist, just so you know. You're fine. That's really mean. Are you okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So that gets to a larger point of, hateful comments online are very common. And so why is it okay to post them online, but, not say them in real life? And so, it's some examples of some mainstream platforms that actually have some really hateful content, like Facebook or Twitter. You can see that it still exists today, right? We talk a little bit about Holocaust denial that lives on some platforms, or conspiracy theories around Jews and how they control the world, or even some very violent imagery that is oftentimes shown on again some of these mainstream platforms like Facebook. And so it really does exist today. As folks were coming into the room, I did ask a poll, which is, have you ever experienced hate and harassment online? And about 29% of you said yes, about 55% of you said no, and then about 16% of you were unsure. And that actually relatively lines up with ADL's own research as an organization, because when we're looking at our Center on Technology and Society's 2021 survey on online harassment, about 35% of people experience some type of harassment, right? So this includes things like name calling, embarrassment, harassment, physical threats, sexual harassment, stalking, sustained harassment. All these things are all types of harassment that folks face online. And it's interesting that our poll is relatively close to the results of the poll that we took just as people were walking in. So it's nice to know that our data is somewhat accurate, I would say, if this group is any indication of it. In 2019, we did a survey of multiplayer gaming, and for many folks who game online, in terms of whether they stream or they play multiplayer games, or in different networks, we have seen a severe amount of harassment that folks face, right? From being called offensive names and discriminated against, or sexually harassed, or stalked, or doxxed. About 74% of gamers have faced some kind of harassment. And so that's actually a very shocking number for us as well. When we look at the ecosphere of social media and some of these sites online, ADL oftentimes uses artificial intelligence to detect hate speech. So in this case, we used Reddit as an example. And on Reddit, there's a number of different subreddits or communities that folks join to talk about different very specific topics. But when we talk about hate speech on these platforms, these are the different things that kind of came up in regards to words strongly associated with hate speech: Jews, Black, white, hate, woman. These are all types of kind of hateful rhetoric that folks are engaging in. And it's very interesting to see how some of the different subreddits in particular have a higher rate of hate speech associated with it, right? Men's rights, white rights. Those are very very misogynistic or very racist subreddits that exist on the platform today. On Gab, which is another social media kind of platform, we have seen the rise of derogatory words or terms being used and peaking during very critical times in our country. During the inauguration in 2017, with the inauguration of Donald Trump. We saw the word white peak during the inauguration. During Charlottesville, you could see how before and after Charlottesville, the word Jew was used more often after the neo-Nazi march on Charlottesville. And so how are we thinking about how we're using this data on how social media influences life, influences our society, influences the dialogue that we have today in a very large and meaningful way. And so we present this research because it really gives us a good idea on the data of how hate online is being propagated and circulated, and how it kind of ebbs and flows with some of the different events. And does it influence events, or do events influence it, right? And so we have to really think critically about how hate speech kind of has that pattern of growth and decline over time. So and again, another study that we did is that we analyzed a bunch of tweets from August to September 2018 around a series of hashtags on both the left and the right, with about 30% of them being bots, but 80% of the anti-Semitic tweets using political hashtags are associated with the right side of the political spectrum. And the most popular term in anti-Semitic tweets by conservatives was about George Soros, who is a philanthropic billionaire that happens to also be Jewish, and is often used in conspiracy theories around controlling the world and influencing events that happen throughout history. And so again, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are certainly on the rise there. They're on the rise in the real world right now with everything that's happening. So, it's really interesting how, again, online hate has become such an incredibly difficult and terrible problem. So let's talk about where it comes from. So ADL, Center on Technology and Society, actually does a lot of different things, not only doing research on this, but they also provide like products and really understanding the relationship between hate speech and the actors who are propagating them, right? So they created this product called the Relationships Between Actors diagram. It looks at the problem of online hate from a different lens, thinking about actors, specific places, opportunities to intervene, and how to make changes in the system. So I'm going to go talk about the diagram from left to right in terms of the inputs and the outputs and everything in between. So let's talk about the inputs. So inputs into online hate, these are things like that essentially feed into the online hate ecosphere: families, communities, media, schools, peers. And people might be wondering, like, how do families feed into this, right? They oftentimes have biases, or they instill hateful ideologies that manifest in online ways. The media, they have their own biases that they feed into this larger narrative around online hate. Bullying incidents can escalate into online hate. Peers can pressure to fit in, or feel pressure to fit in, or to bully, to incite. And so all these attitudes, all these things kind of propagate themselves into this larger notion of online hate. The inputs here listed are not limited to these 5, but I would say these are some of the main ones. So again, it goes into this larger sphere of online hate. And so let's talk a little bit about the players. So once it gets onto the internet, who are the people to consume it? Well, the obvious answer oftentimes is formal hate groups, right? That have who subscribe to really these hateful ideologies, who oftentimes, profit off of them. They also are, used by authoritarian governments, right? Online hate is used by authoritarian governments to oppress their citizens, to restrict the flow of information, to spread propaganda around their messaging. And they use these social spaces. They're a little small to read, sorry, on an iPad. I will, it will be a little bit more clear. I'll try to zoom in here in a second. They use these social spaces to, again, either profit or influence society as a whole. And so when we think about the different kind of players that feed off of online hate and how they use it, they have really dire consequences. Some other players that exist are governments, right? They don't have to be authoritarian governments, but oftentimes governments they can be influenced by online hate through online hate biases, right? They can bias through their opinions, their views, and in turn create laws that that may affect a marginalized community differently or in a negative manner, right? People, right? They might, including scholars, they might be influenced by online hate, and nonprofits who include NGOs who train law enforcement and things like that. So how does this all feed into this larger narrative of outcomes? So obviously, it results in hate speech, right? Online hate manifests this way into hate speech, which in turn marginalizes vulnerable communities, creates racist hate speech, sexist hate speech, and at the end of the day, creates offline violence and terror. So we get from biased attitudes to online hate to influence of policy to an outcome of offline terror and violence. This is a real diagram to talk about how does online hate create offline consequences. And I think we're starting to see that more and more every single day with how the internet is being used to radicalize individuals, and it has been used to spread propaganda that has resulted in terrorist attacks and massacres, and oftentimes these white supremacists or these people who commit these crimes, they post manifestos on fringe ideology websites. And so I think it's a real testament to the real consequences of online hate. And this is the larger diagram. This diagram can be seen on ADL's website on their Center for Technology and Society. And you can probably zoom in that way. And we have a number of other products which talk about how online hate kind of propagates itself too. So this is a very basic understanding or basic kind of outline of how it kind of can grow from inputs to outputs. So with all that being said, I believe that this video is probably a good example of that diagram and how it flows through that diagram. And so if anyone has seen the recent documentary Q Into the Storm on HBO, if you haven't seen it, strongly recommend that you do if you have 6 hours to watch it. But this is just a small clip from their YouTube page, and I think really demonstrates that flowchart. So here we go.
Soon, Q's theories became Trump's theories.
It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Trump's theories became Q's theories.
We call them the Fraud and Death Administration.
Someone from the Q community would sell bleach as a cure. Trump would sell it later.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute.
Trump would push HCQ, a drug that had no proven benefits for coronavirus.
Hydroxychloroquine. I'm taking it. Hydroxychloroquine.
And Q would follow. It was like, after you. No, after you, I insist.
All I can tell you is, so far, I seem to be okay.
And when Trump turned against masks, Q agreed. And Anons followed.
Are you going to allow the government to tell you you have to wear a mask?
Videos of people taking off their masks, shouting a parade of wild theories.
I don't wear a mask for the same reason I don't wear underwear. Things gotta breathe.
Received more likes, clicks, and subscribes than the CDC's dry, evidence-based guidance.
Even the normies out there, even they're beginning to question.
Q appeared to offer concrete, good versus evil answers in a chaotic world, giving its adherents a sense of control over the uncontrollable.
COVID is the biggest lie fake news has ever told.
And with an election coming up, some even felt inspired by QAnon to run, tapping the power that its ever-increasing community represented.
Honestly, everything that I've heard of Q, I hope that this is real.
24 QAnon candidates ran for United States Congress. 2 would eventually make it to Capitol Hill.
I just want to say to Nancy Pelosi, she's a hypocrite, she's an anti-American, and we're going to kick that bitch out of Congress.
You know, in 2018, 2019, QAnon was this thing that was kind of growing in power in the GOP, but that you never thought that any political party would be like sort of afraid to offend QAnon supporters or alienate them. But 2020 was really the year that QAnon kind of came into its own as a force in the GOP.
Right. So that clip is obviously a pretty extreme example about how it's created this feedback loop in terms of online to real world, back to online, back to real world. So we are it's obviously very troubling, and we saw how online influences like QAnon can result in very extreme consequences, like the insurrection that we saw on January 6th. And so when we talk about online hate, now that we understand how this kind of feedback loop is created, why is it growing? What is the consequences of its growth online, and who are the actors, right, that are really kind of making it grow? So I love for showing this chart because I think it's really interesting to see the different kinds of conspiracies that have existed online, and how that has kind of fed into this larger narrative of how people interact online, right? For a long time, folks have these weird, outlandish conspiracy theories like, like Pizzagate, or the moon landing being fake, or that the Earth is flat, and things that are, very demonstrably false. But for a long time, these folks existed in their own little bubbles, in their own little worlds, talking to their very small group of people. But with COVID-19 and really coming onto, going into quarantine and coming more onto the internet, people have more access to these outlandish conspiracy theories that have existed throughout time. And so, folks used to have to go to these, in-person meetings to meet like-minded people to talk about these, again, very fake, outlandish, detached from reality conspiracies. But now they just have to click the button a couple of times and they are on, some of these platforms that are more mainstream and you're able to converse with them pretty freely, and again, create this feedback loop to reinforce these ideas. And so, while some of them seem a little bit less, harmful, things that probably actually happened, all the way up to things that are extremely detached from reality, this is kind of a good chart of showing how that progression is. And even though UFOs is now in this kind of close to leaving reality, now that all this stuff has come out recently, it's really interesting to think about that. But in any case, I wanted to, so one of the things that ADL believes is kind of fueling this surge of online hate is not just like these people who believe in conspiracy theories. It's also the platforms themselves, right? They're creating this environment in which it's allowed to live and thrive and build upon itself. And again, create this feedback loop that people want to hear and want to see rather than what they need to see. And as you saw in that QAnon clip, they talked about how things that talked about how they that are more outlandish or conspiracy or QAnon supported get more subscribes, more likes, more views than the dry CDC guidance around COVID-19, right? And so why is that? And is it because that's what people want to see rather than what they need to see? So I'm going to share this video that was on NBC Nightly News that I thought demonstrates a really nicely talks about how the algorithm that's created with these social media platforms divides us more than unites us. So I'm going to go out of my presentation real quick and try to find it. Okay. So this is something that was played on NBC Nightly News, and I will play it now.
Who didn't want to share her last name, shares a house with her mother.
Where is she now? Is she in the house with you now?
Yeah, I think she's downstairs with my son.
But social media is tearing them apart.
The things she sends me, I feel that I can't trust her if she's my mother.
She says a year ago, her mother started consuming right-wing content on social media.
This election was a military-grade sting operation.
And is now sharing videos about QAnon and anti-Semitic theories. Her mother declined to speak with us.
It's not that I think she's my enemy. It's that I'm afraid that she's being used as a weapon against me.
Researchers say this happens every day. So we performed an unscientific test. I took my Facebook account that had no followers or friends. I'm going to follow the top 3 right-leaning pages plus some dog content and see what happens. My colleague Melanie created a new account and did the same, but she went left 7 days.
A lot of people just commending President Biden's job so far.
What the hell did Joe Biden just say, part 14? On Facebook and YouTube, clicking on whatever their algorithms suggest. Melanie's feed stayed with the issues at first.
Bernie Sanders chairs hearing on the high cost of prescription drugs.
But by day 3, it was a lot of one thing.
It's a lot from Occupy Democrats. That's kind of the dominating force on my page right now.
And mine just went more and more extreme, recommending new influencers. Now they're throwing me at Dan Bongino. Conspiracy theories by day 4. Bigfoot believers. Really? Nonstop anger by day 5. Leftists are becoming the racists. Same with Melanie's.
So the other day, somebody sent me a link to Conservapedia, a Wikipedia made for and by conservatives. And it's pretty bad.
And by the end of the week, a steady diet of fear. The world looks very dangerous on YouTube. Violent robbery caught on camera. Woman fires shots at home intruders. Facebook had no comment. YouTube says that recent changes mean watch time of borderline content from recommendations has dropped by over 70% in the US. But researchers say the algorithms are geared to grab us. We click on extreme content, so the system gives us more extreme content.
Over time, that can actually give you the impression that some things that are more obscure or extreme are very much in the normal sphere of conversation.
The most successful influencers are the most extreme.
On Twitter, 73% of posts about politics are created by about 6% of Twitter users, and those 6% of Twitter users have very extreme views.
Jerusha now belongs to an online group for adults who've lost loved ones to politics on social media.
It makes it 10 times worse knowing that this is happening like everywhere in this country right now.
Jake Ward, NBC News, Oakland, California.
Okay, so as we think about that, again, we see that social media this algorithm is created to create this feedback loop. And so one of the thoughts around it is this, why this is happening and why these divisions are happening and why online hate is propagating is this rise of tribalism, right? That, tribal epistemology, which is something that Vox's contributor kind of deemed it, in which information is evaluated based not on conformity to common standards of evidence, but on whether your community or tribe advocates for it, right? And again, we see this with how Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, different kind of platforms recommend it. And so again, once this online hate starts to happen, it's really amplified in a really disturbing kind of way. Why is this so prevalent? Well, also because false information spreads faster than truth. Right? When we look at this research by MIT, we see that false narratives spread faster than truthful narratives on Twitter. And you can see how they spread during the 2012 election, they spread during the 2016 election, during these Trump deflections as well, how large of an influence they have over the green line, which is the truth. And so when we think about the false information spread of online hate and how online hate continues to live out there, social media companies are really accountable for how this happens and why this happens. And while, some of the leadership within social media companies have been very, dismissive of these claims, again, we see what kind of consequences it has. Again, we see how Holocaust denial lives on Facebook, right? There's this hollow hoax and Holocaust big lie. And this is Alex Jones, a extreme nut job conspiracy theorist. But these folks not only are they spreading lies and hate and conspiracy theories, they're profiting off of it. There's a profit model to these social media companies like Facebook or on YouTube, that the more outlandish, the more hateful, the more extreme that this content is, the more that they profit. And so the system is broken when we talk about how this is, you know, allowed to grow and live on these different platforms. And so I think the best way to sum it up is to talk a little bit, or is to hear from our good friend Sacha Baron Cohen, an ADL award winner, who spoke at our conference 2019, to talk about social media's role. And he has really taken the mantle in terms of driving the conversation around social media influences of online hate and harassment, and how that and the accountability that these platforms need to have. And so let's hear from him about what he thinks.
The greatest propaganda machine in history. Let's think about it. Facebook, YouTube, and Google, Twitter, and others, they reach billions of people. The algorithms these platforms depend on deliberately amplify the type of content that keeps users engaged. It's why fake news outperforms real news, because studies show that lies spread faster than truth. Today, around the world, demagogues appeal to our worst instincts. Conspiracy theories, once confined to the fringe, are going mainstream. It's as if the age of reason, the era of evidential argument, is ending. And now knowledge is increasingly delegitimized and scientific consensus is dismissed. Hate crimes are surging, as are murderous attacks on religious and ethnic minorities. Now, what do all these dangerous trends have in common? I'm just a comedian and an actor, I'm not a scholar, but one thing is pretty clear to me. All this hate and violence is being facilitated by a handful of internet companies that amount to the greatest propaganda machine in history. On the internet, everything can appear equally legitimate. Breitbart resembles the BBC. The fictitious protocols of the Elders of Zion look as valid as an ADL report, and the rantings of a lunatic seem as credible as the findings of a Nobel Prize winner. Voltaire was right when he said, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." And social media lets authoritarians push absurdities to billions of people. I believe that it's time for a fundamental rethink of social media and how it spreads hate, conspiracies, and lies. Now, last month, however, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook delivered a major speech that, not surprisingly, warned against new laws and regulations on companies like his. Well, some of these arguments are simply, pardon my French, bullshit. Now, if a neo-Nazi comes goose-stepping into a restaurant and starts threatening other customers and saying he wants to kill Jews, would the owner of the restaurant, a private business, be required to serve him an elegant 8-course meal? Of course not. The restaurant owner has every legal right, and indeed, I would argue, a moral obligation to kick that Nazi out. And so do these internet companies. In every other industry, a company can be held liable when their product is defective. When engines explode or seatbelts malfunction, car companies recall tens of thousands of vehicles at a cost of billions of dollars. It only seems fair to say to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, your product is defective. You are obliged to fix it, no matter how much it costs and no matter how many moderators you need to employ.
So one of the things that I think Sacha Baron Cohen touches upon is that they have an obligation to fix it, and that you know, their platforms are essentially broken. You know, I think when we think about how online hate has grown exponentially in the last several years in particular, you know, these places that people congregate, that people use to connect with others, it has really been hijacked in a lot of different ways. And I think we have to be really thoughtful about how they're being used to propagate these really disgusting ideologies. And so what can we do about it? This is the crux. This is like everything that we're building toward in this presentation. So as CTS, as the Center for Technology and Society would say, it's about paprika, which is not only a spice, but also an acronym for policy, advocacy, products, research, incident response, keeping platforms accountable. The keeping platforms accountable is funny, but the policy around like what kind of policies or laws do we have? How are we advocating for these policies and laws? How are we creating products that help monitor hate online and the speech that's online to make sure that these algorithms are not being used to spread propaganda? How are we conducting research around hate speech and hate hate incidents? Where are people allowed to report these incidents? How do we use that? And then how do we keep these platforms accountable? These platforms are private companies that have their own set of standards that they can easily enforce, hate speech and hate online from being used. And so the first thing that I'll talk about is managing cyber hate and harassment, right? You can report it to the platform anytime you see hate online, whether it's hate speech or something that's harmful to the community. I think it's important to report it to the platform, right? So ADL has a cyber hate and harassment reporting tool, which allows you to report to a number of these different platforms, right? And it gives you a guide on how to walk through that. And I think that's really, it's really useful. Whenever something's reported to us, we often ask them, did you report it to the platform? They say, no, I don't know how to do that. We direct them to this. We also have a guide on managing cyber hate and harassment. And that kind of provides some of these recommendations that I'm going to talk about. And then obviously you can always report it to us as an organization. If you see something at ado.org/report incident, if you're in our region, in the 5-state region, it'll automatically come to our office and we'll try to respond in a timely manner. The next thing is around removing your name and contact information from online pages, right? You want to think about how, to prevent yourself from being harassed online or, doxxed or whatever it is. You might want to consider removing your name and contact information from online pages from publicly available sources like white pages. You can opt out and you can, and it's pretty easy to do so, but there are a number of different pages and websites that have, oftentimes if you Google your name or whatever, it'll pop up. And so, you can protect yourself by removing your name and contact information online, not to make you too paranoid. The third thing is thinking about securing your social media pages, right? Making sure that your private settings are on the appropriate level that you would like to see. Oftentimes people will comment. I cannot tell you how many times I see hateful, ridiculous, instigating comments on the Seattle Times, Oregon Live, all these mainstream website or Facebook pages that are trying to instigate people. Don't feed the trolls, right? And I think this great guide here on the right hand side around monitoring, assessing, engaging, resolving, deflecting, and diluting is a great kind of flow chart in terms of do not feed the trolls. That is what they want to see. They don't try to combat it directly with people. I think calling it out is one thing, but another thing is like wasting your time on people who are not willing to change or to think about their viewpoints outside of their small bubble. So I think this flowchart is super helpful. And so you can find it on kunocreative.com/blog as a kind of attribution of it. Another thing that I recommend you to do is learn more about the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, right? So ADL was part of a coalition of organizations that created the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, which told Facebook to essentially stop profiting off of hate, change your website standards to stop hate from propagating online, from being part of the narrative. And because oftentimes, anytime that people click on something, anytime that people are able to see, read, see, view, whatever it is, Facebook profits. They profit off of your information, your data. And so stop, this campaign was to tell Facebook, stop profiting off of this hateful content on their platform, because they have no incentive otherwise to stop it, because they keep on making money. So go to stophateforprofit.org to learn more about the campaign, sign the petition. Definitely want to be engaged in that. Legislative action, you can call on Congress to take meaningful action on Section 230, which is a complicated issue, which I'm not going to go into today. You can have them engage in stopping hate and harassment on a local level by addressing issues like swatting, doxing, cyber stalking, non-consensual imagery. A number of states, their internet laws were written in the 90s. The internet has obviously changed since the 90s. And so we need to make sure that our laws are in alignment with how the internet is being used today, and some of the emerging threats that have come out of the internet, right? And so, when we think about that, I know a number of you are from Oregon, but so there is a legislative alert that we have out right now, is that HB 3047, which is ADL's, which is Oregon's anti-doxing bill, which is essentially creating civil liability for unlawful doxing that with the intent to injure, harass, or stalk. That has been voted out of committee very recently. And is probably going to hit the floor in the next couple of weeks before the legislative session adjourns. Urge your Oregon State Senator to support it. You can go to cl.adl.org/HB3047 to sign the petition. We hope that you'll take this meaningful action because, again, doxing bills are not something that we see across the country. Only a couple of states have it. In Washington, we recently passed an anti-swatting bill, maybe something we think about in Oregon next year. But these are real things that we can take action on, and we can make sure that our legislators and our elected officials are being attentive to. And so that's something that we hope. I'm gonna stop here. I threw a lot at you. I have only about 8 minutes left before we end the session, or I'm supposed to, but I'll take questions in the Q&A. I'll take it in the chat. I'll take it wherever you have it. And you're welcome to contact us. Our email is pacificnorthwest@adl.org. You can always report things to us, again, at adl.org/report incident. We're here for you as a resource. And so with that ends my presentation, and we'll head over to the Q&A section here. Again, please use the Whova app or use the Q&A function in I guess Zoom as well. And I see a couple here to answer. So yes, you mentioned that social media profits from polarization. Where's the fiscal link? How does this create profits? Okay, so like I mentioned before, the more views, the more clicks, the more subscribes that that individuals get, the more they're able to monetize it. You can often see it actually on YouTube with QAnon conspiracy theorists. They often got hundreds of thousands of clicks around the QAnon conspiracy, or views around QAnon conspiracy theories. And in turn, they are able to profit off of the number of views that they got. So YouTube has a monetization policy. I think if you get over like 1,000 subscribers to your channel, you can start monetizing. So people literally monetize off of conspiracy theories, which is wild. Social media platforms like Facebook, they profit primarily off of advertisement agencies and different places that want to show you their products. And so, they're profiting off of your information and your data that online. And so let's see, can you make your slides available so that I can read them later? Yes, I can make them available. I'll give them to the organizers of this content. The next question is around the anti-doxing bill. Curious about how it deals with doxing, allow individuals to sue, anything more? Yes. So I encourage you to look it up on Oregon's legislative website. It's House Bill 3047, creates a civil cause of action for individuals to essentially create lawsuits against others for doxing them, right? With the intent of stalking, injuring, or harassing them, right? And so we have seen, I know for in particular, there's a conservative, quote unquote, news guy who oftentimes doxes protesters, and in turn those protesters get harassing, threatening things at their homes, things like that. So the bill is relatively simple. It's very narrow in scope. It doesn't apply to investigators or journalists, right, who are trying to break a big story. It's really thoughtful in the way it does, and it stands up to constitutional muster, which Oregon in particular has a very strong constitution around free speech. And so again, how we've worked with a number of different organizations like the ACLU and constitutional scholars to make sure that the language is best and doesn't infringe upon free speech rights. There's a difference between malicious intent versus free speech. And so we want to make that very clear within the bill itself. There's a question in the chat or in Whova that says, has Intergroup graphed the rise in hate crimes and hate groups over the last 30 or more years? It would be interesting to see if there has been a huge rise as social media became available. Yes, so you could probably talk a little bit about this transition from 2019 to 2020 in particular, in terms of how people were online a lot more in 2020 and how the rise of online hate pretty much surged right in the last year. And so I believe ADL has a couple of reports on that. I'm happy to share them after this call. But yes, hate crimes are certainly on the rise. They're Oregon and Washington have seen theirs rise by an exponential amount in the last 2 or 3 years. Washington, in fact, is the second highest number of hate crimes per capita in the entire country. When you think of Washington, you think of a bastion of progressive values. But we have a huge hate problem and a huge hate group problem. So I think there is certainly a correlation between online hate and hate groups and hate crimes, certainly, in terms of how these ideologies are becoming more mainstream and are allowed to live on mainstream platforms. Can you expand on the last slide? Not sure that I got it. You were in a hurry to finish up. The bill was not clear to me. I tried to explain it just now in terms of what its intent was, but again, HB 3047 in Oregon. Let's see here. Do you feel deplatforming some pro-Trump pages / people push more mainstream right-wing people to places like Gab, where there's a lot more white power, et cetera, messaging? That's a really good question. So the question is around, as we deplatform folks on Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, will they move to these more fringe ideologies or more fringe platforms like Gab, like Parler, like 8kun or 4kun or 4chan? I'm actually a pretty strong believer that if people really want to find it, they will find it. But by allowing it to exist on mainstream platforms, you're bringing in a more mainstream audience, and I think that's actually a big problem with a lot of these platforms that allow it to live there. People, it's interesting. A lot of these like quote unquote health and wellness groups are oftentimes targeted for conspiracy theories, extremism, and right-wing punditry that have existed online. And so, how are people who are seemingly not ideal in terms of these ideologies are being exposed to it? And when you have, again, allowing it to live on Facebook, which is a 1 billion person platform, it certainly has more of an impact than it does when it lives on like these crazy fringe platforms like Gab. So, I think it's very it's very difficult to talk to think about that, but I think more research needs to be done. With that being said, it's 11:50. I'm supposed to end my presentation now. So again, if you have any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out to us, pacificnorthwest@adl.org. Follow us on Twitter at ADLPNW, on Facebook at ADLPNW, and on Instagram at ADLPNW. We're really excited to continue to have this conversation. And again, we're so grateful to be brought into this space today, and we hope that you have a great rest of your conference. Everyone, have a great day. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm ending. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks.